Running sub 45 seconds indoors in the 400 meters is not easy, but it's actually becoming a lot more common quicker than we think. The first person to ever break the 45-second barrier indoors was Michael Johnson all the way back in 1995 when he ran 44.97 seconds. It wasn't until 10 years later in 2005 when LaShawn Merritt broke the 45-second barrier, becoming the second person to ever do so. He was then followed a few weeks later by Karan Clement, who broke the barrier as well, this time running the world record of 44.57 seconds, a mark that was heralded by the track and field community for a very long time. He was then followed up by Karani James, who ran 44.8 in 2011, and since then, we've seen massive gains in the amount of men who have broken the 45-second barrier to this day in 2025. This past weekend at the Big 12 Indoor Championships, we saw Ezekiel Nathaniel representing Baylor and also Nigeria. He dropped a 44.74 personal best to take the indoor win in the 400, moving him up to number 8 all-time in the event. He was closely followed behind by Jaden Davis from Arizona, who ran 44.95 seconds, moving him to number 18 all time. And this came off the heels of Ezekiel Nathaniel running a 44.9 just a few weeks prior. So all these performances kind of highlight the progress that we've been seeing in these events. So I just want to quickly talk about the sub 45 second barrier for the men, and more specifically how it's progressed over the past couple decades. Again, dating back to the 1990s, and then kind of looking forward, the landscape of the 400 meter dash leading into the NCAA championships in just about 2 weeks time. So first off with the men, as we can see, there have been 18 individual men who have dropped sub 45 seconds indoors in the 400 at least once in their career. And like I noted earlier, it was all kicked off by Michael Johnson, the first to ever do it all the way back in February of 1995, running a time of 44.97 seconds, again, back in February of 1995. He quickly followed that up just a month later in March of 1995, running 44.63 seconds. And again, those two performances were the world record. Like I noted, 10 years later, LaShawn Merritt joined the fold. Karan Clement, he joined the fold, breaking that legendary world record. And I think that record stood as, really a significant marker because it was such a massive mark to be able to get to, and it broke a Michael Johnson world record. We're talking about 2005, when Michael Johnson has been retired for some years at this point. He had the 200 meter world record. He had the 400 meter indoor and outdoor record. He was almost heralded as the best in the sport, coming off of, Carl Lewis. Usain Bolt had not really come onto the scene. Michael Johnson was the guy and had all these records. So for Karan Clement to take that down, even if it was indoors, that was a massive, massive performance. Following that up, you also had Michael Norman, 2018. He broke the record as well. Then we come to the most recent mark of 44.49 by Christopher Malice Williams, which was run just last year. And of course, the most recent athlete to go sub 45 seconds was Jaden Davis, again, getting second place at the Big 12 championships just this past weekend. But when we're talking about performances, there have been 25 sub 45 second performances indoors from these 18 men across the board. And for the most part, it's very few of them that have actually doubled up and run sub 45 seconds more than once. You're talking about Christopher Morales Williams. He did it last year in 2024. Michael Johnson, he did it 3 times in his career. You also have Ezekiel Nathaniel, like I noted, Big 12 conference championship title, and then also he had run it earlier this season in about February, about 2-3 weeks ago. You also have Elijah Godwin. He had dropped sub 45 seconds on 2 occasions in 2023. And then finally, you also have Randolph Ross. He has 3 performances under the 45-second barrier, which is no easy feat. The only other person to do that is Michael Johnson. So all these guys, it's very few and far between. You see many of these athletes with only 1 performance. Akeem Bloomfield, Ahmad Robinson, Fred Curley, Karan Clement, even someone like Karani James or even a Michael Norman, right? All these athletes only have 1 performance under the 45-second barrier. So it's very, very challenging to do it multiple times, speaking to how tough this barrier actually is. Now, on top of that, I was kind of going through the few world records that we had seen throughout the course of history. 4 men had actually broken the world record and had done it on 5 occasions. Like I previously noted, Michael Johnson, he had done it with that 44.97. That was the very first mark under the 45-second barrier. He followed that up with a 44.63 just about a month later. And then we saw Karan Clement, Michael Norman, Christopher Morales Williams. So we've seen some generally steady progression, but we're talking about a big jump after Michael Johnson did it in 1995 all all the way up to 2005 with Karan Clement. So literally we're talking 10 years at that point. And then another 13 years before Michael Norman hit the world record. And then we fast forward just 6 years before Christopher Morales Williams takes it down a notch. And for the most part, from Michael Johnson with his 44.63 all the way down to Christopher Morales Williams, we're only talking about less than 0.2 of a second, right? Literally 0.14 seconds from Michael Johnson in 1995 all the way up to Christopher Morales Williams in 2024. 30 years between these world records, and we've only seen a little bit of progress. But that doesn't tell the whole story. We'll get to it in a second. The other thing I really do want to highlight here is how often NCAA athletes actually do compete and have been running sub 45 seconds. Under competitors here, anyone that you see in green means that they did this performance when they were a professional athlete. They were no longer in the NCAA. So you're literally only talking about what Michael Johnson did it 3 times. You have Christopher Bailey, and then you have Braylon Taplin. So 3 athletes throughout their career have run their sub 45 second performances while they were in the NCAA. And why is that? Well, many athletes, after they go professional, they essentially don't focus on the indoor 400 meters anymore, especially, again, a lot of these athletes who compete in the NCAA. You're talking about athletes like a Michael Norman, LaShawn Merritt, Karani James, Fred Curley, Akeem Bloomfield. Many of these athletes, maybe they attempted the indoor 400 once or twice in their career as a professional, but it just does not happen frequently. And on top of that, many of these marks occurred at either conference championships or at NCAA championships. So highlighting the fact that a lot of these professionals are not running sub 45 seconds because they're not competing at these championships. We're not even seeing them occur at USA championships or world championships. These things aren't happening frequently. You can look at the dates that I've noted here in red. Any of them in red are marks that occurred outside of either conference championships or NCAA championships. For example, Ezekiel Nathaniel, he just ran his 44.92 a couple weeks ago. Again, this was just at a meet in Texas Tech. Braylon Taplin, he ran his at Texas A&M, but, not at a conference championship. He was already professional at that point. Randolph Ross, he had 1 mark there. Christopher Bailey, he just ran this mark of 44.70 earlier in 2025. Michael Johnson, his marks actually came at the USA Indoor Championships in 1995 as well as 1996. And then, of course, his earlier mark came, a little bit earlier in the season as well. So those are the only times that we're looking at athletes running marks outside of conference championships or NCAA Indoor Championships. Yes, again, noting that Michael Johnson, his 2 marks did come at the USA Indoor Championships, but very different circumstances compared to what we're seeing nowadays, where a lot of NCAA athletes are dropping these sub 45 second performances at major championships while they're in school. Now, one other thing that's really interesting here is the fact that most of these athletes are from the United States. You're talking about out of the 25 marks, 18 of them are from American athletes, while on the flip side, you have 7 of them which are from athletes not from the United States. And what I really like about this is that many of these performances are actually coming from more recent times. Again, Ezekiel Nathaniel running his performances just this year in 2025. Christopher Morales Williams, him running his performances just last year in 2024. Yes, you do have Akeem Bloomfield, you have Braylon Taplin, Karani James, but I do like to see, these athletes from all countries around the world actually dipping their toes into the sub 45 second barrier. And I think this does kind of run parallel with athletes from around the world outdoors actually dipping their toes under the 44 second barrier, something that we've seen happening since about 2012 when Karani James first broke the barrier at the 2012 Olympic Games in London. Since then, we've seen Karani James and Wade Van Niekerk and Isaac Makwala. So many guys have actually gotten under the barrier who are not American. So I love to see the diversity across the board. Now, one important thing I want to highlight is the frequency that we've been seeing athletes dip under the 45 second barrier in recent years. If we just take a look at the progression of athletes over the past couple years, from 1995 all the way to 2000, just about 2000, right? 2019, 2000 was the off year. We had 9 athletes break the barrier on 11 different occasions. Remember, Michael Johnson had done it 3 times in his career, so that gives you 10 and 11, but 9 athletes doing it a total of 11 times. And you're talking about from 1995 all the way to the year 2020, that's a 25-year period. But let's talk about the last 5 years from 2020 all the way to 2025. And yes, 2021, but 2021 to 2025, just 5 years, you have, again, 9 athletes, but they have done it 14 times. So just within 5 years, we have seen the same amount of athletes run sub 45 seconds as had been done in the past 25 years. and they had done it more times in just 5 years. That is an insane amount of depth, an insane amount of progression that we've seen in the event indoors. And on top of that, remember, Michael Johnson had broken the barrier on 3 separate occasions. Well, that never occurred again until 2021. Randolph Ross had done it on 3 separate occasions. That was then followed in 2023 by Elijah Godwin doing it twice. Christopher Morales-Williams, he did it twice. Ezekiel Nathaniel, he did it twice. So we're seeing a lot of consistency from a lot of these guys in recent years, really eclipsing what we saw in the previous 25 years of the event indoors. And the other thing that I really think is important is that since 2017, when we saw Fred Kerley break the barrier running 44.85 at the NCAA Indoor Championships, every single year, excluding 2020, when we of course didn't have the NCAA Championships, we have seen someone go under the 45-second barrier. 2017, 2018, we saw 3 guys actually do it. 2019, don't forget Tyrell Richard, right, for South Carolina State. He actually broke it at the NCAA Indoor Championships. Noah Williams, Randolph Ross, both in 2021. Randolph Ross, Elijah Godwin, Ryan Willie, Christopher Morales-Williams, Ahmad Robinson, still at Texas A&M now, Ezekiel Nathaniel, Christopher Bailey, Ezekiel Nathaniel again, and Jaden Davis. So we are seeing some strong consistency, again, dating back to just about 7 years ago at this point, 8 years ago, 2017. And they are really stepping up and pushing the bounds of what's possible indoors in the 400-meter dash, something that we had not seen pretty much at any point in history since Michael Johnson first broke the barrier all the way back in 1995. Why is this happening? Why is it that we see so many men in more recent times actually breaking the 45-second barrier indoors in the 400 relative to what we've seen in the past? Well, of course, there's a couple different reasons as to why I personally think this is actually occurring. Number one is the competition. These athletes are essentially realizing that, I have no choice but to go under this barrier or but to run as fast as I can, or else I'm not going to be able to compete with the best, or else I'm not going to be able to get top 3 at NCAAs or win the entire race or whatever it may be, right? I think these athletes truly do see that. And when you, again, date back to Fred Kerley in 2017, once he did it, then you had Michael Norman, then you had Akeem Bloomfield. Remember 2018, Akeem Bloomfield ran 44.8 seconds in the first heat of the NCAA 400-meter final. Michael Norman follows that up in the second heat and runs 44.5 to break the world record. I think athletes like Fred Kerley, Michael Norman, Akeem Bloomfield, they kind of set the tone for what we're seeing now, where it is absolutely imperative for you to break 45 seconds to actually get the win at a championship. That's followed up by Tyrell Richards in 2019. A lot of people, again, like to forget about him, but he won NCAAs running sub 45 seconds. That leads to Randolph Ross in 2021 running 44 seconds, but then getting beaten, by Noah Williams in the second heat of the 400. That leads to Ryan Willie and Elijah Godwin both running 44 seconds at NCAAs in 2023. These athletes, again, are realizing that they have no choice but to push themselves to the limits of what's possible in the 400 meters indoors and really go for sub 45 seconds. So that, I think, is probably one of the main reasons as to why. But the other reason, of course, is going to be improvements in technology, improvements in coaching, right? You're talking about shoes are definitely improving. That's drastically going to increase, how fast athletes are running. You're talking about the improvements in tracks where, you go to the New Balance indoor track. We saw Christopher Morales-Williams and Ahmad Robinson both run under 45 seconds there. You're talking about Texas Tech where Ezekiel Nathaniel and Jaden Davis, they were both able to run sub 45 seconds there. So the track technology is going to be improving. The shoe technology is going to be improving. The knowledge that coaches have, they've been consistently learning over the years on how to better coach to the 400. You're also talking about things like nutrition and recovery and all these kind of aspects that are just going to gradually increase and improve as time goes on. That's definitely going to factor into why athletes so frequently are going under the sub 45 second barrier on the men's side. But I do primarily think it's almost a mindset where, again, I have no choice but to run sub 45 seconds or else I'm not even going to be in the conversation. That is what I really think athletes are really honing in on. But final thing, what is it that we should be looking forward to at NCAAs this year? Again, we've already seen on the men's side, Nathaniel Ezekiel, he's, run sub 45 seconds on 2 occasions, 44.74 seconds to lead the NCAA going into championships now. You have Ezekiel Nathaniel. You have Jaden Davis. He, of course, is number 2 in the country right now. Ahmad Robinson, he has run 44.9 last year, getting second place indoors, and he just came off SECs running 44.0. He is, of course, going to be in the conversation. conversation. You have Genoa McIver, you have Will Floyd. There's a lot of guys who are in the, again, 44-second range or 45 low who are very much in the conversation to not only break that barrier, but push the pace of what might be possible. I'm not saying a world record is going to go down. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I would not be surprised to see 2, 3 guys maybe under that barrier, maybe even 4. Again, right now, we already have 3 guys who have broken the barrier in their career. 2 guys have done it this year. Who knows what might be possible? These are some of the athletes who are definitely in the conversation, and I definitely have my eye out for coming up in a few weeks at the NCAA championship. So let me leave you out with a couple questions. First off, why do you think we're seeing so many athletes, specifically on the men's side, breaking the 45-second barrier over the past couple years? Again, from 1995 all the way to 2020, we only saw 9 athletes do it on 11 occasions. From 2020 all the way to 2025, we've now seen 9 athletes do it on 14 different occasions. Massive improvement. On the flip side, how long is it until we see another world record go down? Do you think that we'll see the men's world record go down this year, maybe at NCAA championships? And then finally, what is it that we should expect at the NCAA championships coming up in just about 2 weeks' time, going down in Virginia Beach? Yes, a lot of questions, but go in the comments. Let me know what you think about the progress we've seen in the 400-meter dash, both men's and women's side, and what you're looking for. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Be back again next time. Thanks for watching, y'all.